Fear is one of the most natural feelings of human beings. It can protect us from real dangers, but it can also paralyze us and prevent us from fulfilling our purpose. In the Bible, we find countless accounts of characters who faced fear, but trusted God to move forward. And in the world of anime, few characters exemplify the impact of fear and insecurity, as well as Shinji Ikari from Neon Genesis Evangelion. In this video, we will do a biblical reflection on fear, using Shinji Ikari's journey as a point of analysis. How can we overcome our insecurities? What does the Bible teach us about facing challenges? And above all, how can we trust God even when we feel like we can't? Shinji Ikari, Yomedo Duragir. Shinji is a young man who carries a huge emotional weight with him. Since he was little, he suffered rejection and abandonment from his father, Gendo Ikari, which profoundly affected his self-esteem. When he is called upon to pilot EVA-01 and protect humanity, he finds himself faced with a terrifying choice: face his fears and take on a gigantic responsibility, or run away and hide in his own insecurity. This internal struggle of Shinji reminds us of the passage of Moses, when God called him to free the people of Israel from slavery in Egypt. In Exodus 3 verse 11, Moses responds, "Who am I that I should go before Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" Just like Shinji, Moses felt incapable and unworthy to carry out the mission given to him. The fear of inadequacy is something that often stops us from moving forward. Fear and escape, a destructive cycle. Throughout Evangelion, Shinji constantly tries to evade his responsibilities. He fears pain, suffering, and failure. This reflects a common human tendency. When faced with challenges, our first reaction may be to flee. The prophet Jonah also went through this. When God called him to preach in Nineveh, he fled in the opposite direction. Jonah 1 verse 3. But God brought him back to the right path, showing that running away from the call does not solve our problems. In the Bible, God teaches us that escape is not the solution. In 2 Timothy 1 verse 7, it is written, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." This verse reminds us that we were not made to be dominated by fear, but to act with courage, trusting in the Lord. The fear of rejection and the search for approval. Shinji's other big problem is his desire to be accepted by others. He struggles to gain the approval of his father and those around him. This reminds us of Saul, the first king of Israel. In 1 Samuel 15 verse 24, Saul confesses, "I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and the instructions you gave me. I was afraid of the people and listened to their voice." The search for human approval led him to disobey God, and, as a consequence, he lost the kingdom. Jesus teaches us that our priority should be to please God, not men. In Galatians 1 verse 10, Paul writes, "Do I now seek the approval of men or the approval of God? Or am I seeking to please men? If I were still seeking to please men, I would not be a servant of Christ." Shinji suffers because he seeks external validation, but true security comes from knowing that we are loved by God. The call to act despite fear. Not end of Evangelion. Shinji faces a profound dilemma: continue running or accept his identity and purpose. This dilemma is also experienced by many biblical characters. Joshua, for example, had to assume the role of leader of Israel after the death of Moses. God encouraged him by saying, "Did I not command you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." Joshua 1 verse 9. This promise also applies to us. When God calls us to something, he doesn't leave us alone. Just as Joshua needed to trust the Lord to conquer the promised land, we also need to trust that God will give us strength to overcome our fears. Trusting God to move forward. The greatest lesson we can take from both the Bible and the story of Shinji Ikari is that fear cannot define us. In Philippians 4 verse 13 we read, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." This verse does not mean that we will never feel afraid, but that, even when afraid, we can move forward because God strengthens us. Shinji Ikari teaches us about the consequences of letting ourselves be dominated by fear and insecurity. The Bible, on the other hand, teaches us that we can trust God to give us courage. The choice is in our hands. Will we allow fear to stop us from moving forward? Or will we trust God to move forward? Whatever challenge you face today, remember, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Of whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? Psalms 27 verse 1. Just as God empowered Moses, Jonah, Joshua, and so many others, He can also enable you to overcome fear and fulfill your purpose.